Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Eyes On. I'm Andy Milburn, former Marine Infantry and Special Operations Officer. Jason, over to you.
Thanks, Andy. My name is Jason Lyons. I'm a former Marine and CIA officer. Over to you, D.
What's up, guys? I'm D. I'm the producer of the Team House and Eyes On, and yeah, I'm just here for the ride. Basically, I'm excited about today.
Very, very modestly put.
Yeah,
Always excited. Yeah, actually, it's been no shortage of news. I mean, I'm wondering what we're going to do when everything tapers off, if it ever does. And we always have half a dozen things to talk about. We only get through two, so let's prioritize. And I vote for what's been happening in the Red Sea because it is absolutely effing nuts. When you think about this, it the Houthis are having a untold effect on the global economy. I mean untold because we don't know the ramifications, how long this will last, but already they've had I won't say unprecedented, but I was reading the other day, it's the last time that trade was this badly disrupted was during COVID, which gives you some idea of the fact that it is seriously disrupted. And we can talk about only 10% of the trade going through Suez, 10% of the world's seaborne trade going through the Suez Canal, or 10 to 12%. But actually, supply chains throughout the world are interconnected with supply chains, obviously, that involve going through the Suez Canal. And the alternatives, as you'll remember from your high school geography, D, which was only 5 years ago, is that the alternative going around south, the Cape of Good Hope is it's a torturous journey in many ways. It's not only much longer, it's much rougher on the ships. You're going the Southern Ocean, so all kinds of added expense, the fuel costs. And just to give you an example, I mean, Maersk, which is a massive Danish shipping line, the other day announced that the cost of shipping a container from Asia to the United States has tripled, gone from $2,000 to $6,000 in the last 2 months. Why? Because of the Houthis. And you look at the array, the coalition that is arrayed against them, and all the high tech and everything. But we aren't going to be able to stop them, at least not until they run low on ammunition. And part of it is the terrain. I mean, they've been fighting and moving in that terrain for a long period of time. We've underestimated them. They've had some pretty good training in the last 2 years, and they're very good at shoot and scoot tactics. The missiles they're firing, obviously, solid fuel. So there's minimum time required near the launch site for these things, and they can disappear into. I mean, you've seen maybe pictures of Yemen, I mean, or been there, and it's that whole area is a mass of mountains and wadis. It's I mean, once you get back from the coastline, it's, of course we're not destroying things or stopping them. I mean, you look at our list of targets, yes, storage sites, launching points. These are actually in Houthi hands, the way they operate, these are very transient. So we may have intel on a storage facility, but it's 2 days later, it's
gone.
old intel, unless we've had. So, I mean, there's a lot of things mitigating against the coalition. I've seen this kind of jocular, acerbic coverage in a lot of the Middle Eastern and Asian press about how the US can't stop this, and the British and the UK have conducted a series of airstrikes in the last month.
I'm just sitting here.
And DOD.
I'm sorry.
DOD says that we've done nothing to the capabilities. Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
No, I was just thinking while you were talking about the ripple effect of, and I'm genuinely asking this question, and maybe some of the listeners can help. How does this affect things such as the shipping that used to avoid going past, Cape, Somalia, and the Horn, and now does that force them that way? And how does that help or hurt those pirates? I know that it's a different comparison, it's kind of apples to oranges, but it makes me wonder, like, what the bottleneck, if you took a map, would look like, and the rerouting to try to avoid the areas that the Houthis are attacking. It's just something I was thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, but to your point, yes, it has an effect on shipping that doesn't customarily use that area because now they have to be put into shipping schedules. Um, I mean, the ships that used to get put into shipping schedules, I'm not a, my knowledge of merchant shipping was 3 months spent as a deckhand going around Asia on a container ship. That's another story. Chinese owned, but no, Hong Kong owned at the time.
Nice.
So anyway, oh, so yeah, the other thing, so that, we always talk about or at least geeks like us always talk about the resource imbalance when you in short range air defense, right? When you're shooting at drones that cost maybe $2,000 with $2 million missiles, and that's an example of what's happening in the Red Sea right now. The SM-2 is around $2 million a pop. The SM-6, I think, is, and I know this guy's watching this who memorize all this stuff, but I think it's like, I think it's $6,000, no, $4,000, $4,000. It's like gone for the SM-6, and so way more of an imbalance. But honestly, as long as we have those things on the shelf, the math is still good because it's not about shooting down the drone. It's about all these, all the financial effects, global financial effects that we, United States, are taking on because we are guardians of the world's sea lanes and free commerce and apple pie and all of those things. But so that's not the problem. The problem is that the Israelis are facing across the border with Lebanon and many other places. The fact that as weapon systems become increasingly sophisticated, the means of remote aiming become more prevalent in the hands of these groups. In other words, they're minimizing their risk and able to shoot more accurately further with larger warheads. And that has been, as you know, since 2006, in the Second Lebanon War, that has been a very steep in capability for Hezbollah as Iran has pushed stuff into their hands. And I'm deliberately jumping between the Houthis and Hezbollah, but there's one reason, okay, and people would take me to task for this. There's one reason why even Hezbollah is less, at least right now, than the Houthis, and that is because
Andy,
Hezbollah,
can you repeat that one more time about Hezbollah being less than? Because it was a little laggy.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, Hezbollah is arguably less of a risk to global security, right, or regional conflict, regional stability. I'm sorry, in the Middle East than the Houthis. I mean, it's not really arguable. I would say absolutely, because Hezbollah, despite the fact that they are they are extremely capable now, far more so than they were in 2006 in terms of having filled their ranks with combat experienced operatives who don't want to sit around in Lebanon with their thumbs up their bum. They're all raging for it, and they're armed. But the reason why they are not, I don't think, imminent danger right now, Nasrallah is beholden and does follow to some way. He does follow what Iran is telling him. I mean, behind the scenes, we learned after the war in 2006, which apparently he launched without permission from Iran. Who knows? But anyway, he launched it, and the Iranians were pissed off because Hezbollah is their pocket militia to poke holes in Israel, or poke Israel as they want, and they didn't want Nasrallah having it decimated plus half of Lebanon, and because it set them back. And so what they did is they forgave Nasrallah. We're very wise, because Nasrallah he's who he is. He's iconic. I mean, even everyone understands that. Nasrallah is one guy that I can think of. We talked about decapitation psychology, that we always think we can whack someone and that'll really bring the organization crashing down. Nasrallah is one guy I can think of right now where the death of a leader would really seriously impact the whole organization, maybe, decisively. But the Houthis aren't listening. At least that's what we glean, all right, through open source information, that they are not listening to Iran. So, or at least they're not as obedient as they once were. They're teenagers, right? So there's two things that are open to the coalition to stop this happening. One is, and this absolutely will not happen, I know, boots on the ground in Yemen. No, that's the worst thing. You just use technology to find it. No, you can't. Yeah, that's exactly one of the lessons of 2006. You've got to, unfortunately, have guys on the ground who can push those launch sites back in conjunction with ISR and all those other things you're doing. That's number one. Number two is really seriously bring pressure on Iran. But how do you do that, guys?
Yeah, I think along with those boots on the ground too, you need to have that human intel source on the ground who can tell you who is the Nasrallah equivalent to the Houthis, who's that head that we can cut off that will bring them to their knees, even if it's just temporarily, to give some breathing room to figure this whole thing out.
Yeah.
And I think with the Houthis, that's a tough thing.
Yeah, I think last week we were talking about over-reliance on technical means for collection, right? And that clearly is one of the problems preceding 7 October. Just a total, less reliance on human intelligence. I'd ask you, Jason, do you see us in the US heading that way? Rhetorical question. I don't know.
I think we're always headed that way. Whatever the is going on or is being shown as going on in the media, if we've got a stake in it, which we do wherever on the planet, we're going to do whatever our due diligence intel wise. As far as human is concerned, I think we're pushing, like I've said it, I think last week, we're pushing back that way. We kind of got away from it with GWAT, but now
we're pushing back towards greater emphasis
human.
On human.
Yeah, I think so, because we with near peer adversaries, we have no choice. I'm not, when I say near peer, I can't say that, we're all, or China's on the level of us, Russia's on the level of us as far as certain technologies go. I can't speak to that, but they're close enough that we have to step back to traditional means to get that leg up on them, because that's what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to, like I think I said last week, we need to know what that regional commander or political leader, or even all the way up to heads of state, are thinking, so that we can get a psychological and a political picture to go along with the technology, to go along with what our satellites and our drones are showing. We need somebody on the ground who can tell us, I was in that meeting, this is what he or she said, and this is why I think they said it. Because at the end of the day, somebody's got to push that button. And if we know what that person is thinking, well, then we've got a leg up. So I think we're trying to go back that way. And again, there are people who are still in the game that could probably talk to that better than me, but from what I'm being told, that's where we're going.
Andy, I got a question. In terms of boots on the ground in Yemen, what would that look like? How many guys?
Light footprint,
okay.
soft. Yeah, it's soft. Essentially what was I was saying what was happening before. It's been in the in the media, but certainly just working with partner nation forces within Yemen to
are there strong enough partner nation forces in Yemen on the other side that could help that?
No, conclusively. I can tell you that right now. And this brings up a great point that ties
and
in.
even it ties into intelligence wise too, right? Like how do you set up a network?
Well, exactly. So one of the reasons I'm not an intel guy. I think one of the reasons, there are a number of reasons why I think we've put less emphasis on human, and we've had to make it more and more painful because of legislative requirements, blah, blah. But another reason is this, that you need someone on the ground to run those agents, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a case officer, never have been, but I remember, but I have been in SOF, and I think a parallel is when we started kidding ourselves that we could advise and assist without accompanying, right? That you can build this trust virtually. I'm sure the same is the case for case officers, that there's nothing like a personal, you've got to, you can sustain the relationship by technical means, but the initial meet must be, wherever possible in person. If you can't, if you're not there, and it's not about the, field craft of picking up, it's just about human nature. And so we found whenever we pull out of a place, the thing that hits us possibly the worst is a loss of human intelligence.
Yep.
It's happened in Afghanistan. It happened in Ukraine for the US. I mean, you name it, it's happened in Africa, and now it's happening. Sorry, I know I'm sounding like, but yeah, we either need to just figure out. I mean, come up with if it's I don't know what I'm finding out. If it's laws that are blocking this, then maybe those need to be reconsidered.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, look at Afghanistan in 2001 as a perfect example. We shut everything down prior to the Soviet invasion, and afterwards we never picked it back up. We ran things out of Pakistan. So after 9/11, we had to start from scratch. We sent Jawbreaker in, the Jawbreaker teams. They had to reestablish or establish contact with the Northern Alliance, and we had maybe 1, 2, 3, here and there, old contacts, Masood, all kinds of contacts, but reestablishing contact in an area that you haven't been in any kind of, not necessarily large numbers, but with any kind of intent, it's tough. It's very tough to do. I remember when I was at the agency, when I was doing my OJT at headquarters, we wanted to reestablish contact with a old Soviet era guy who worked in precious metals. And I had to sit and look through, literally, it was a big mail cart full of paper files on this guy, and read through and try to pick out anything that we could use. We knew how to reestablish contact, but what were we going to say? It's like looking up an ex, boyfriend or girlfriend, especially if things, ended on a bad note. It's like, hey, how are you?
Hey, what's up? You need some cash?
Yeah, I've been thinking about you.
I was just thinking about you.
Yeah, so I think that's a tough thing. And plus, in the interim years since 9/11, besides stepping back from human, we also, when we did what we did have going, got burned in China and Iran and other places through covert
in Iraq.
Yeah,
I mean, think how we dropped the intel, the human ball there when we pulled out in 2011. We cut a lot of people loose.
Absolutely.
And we subsequently we took our eye off the ball, and suddenly there was the Islamic State in 2014 sitting in Mosul.
Absolutely. So you have all those obstacles against us, and on top of that, the trust factor is just gone. It's like, okay, you got my dad. I now work in the ministry that he used to work in, but you got him caught and killed. So why would I trust you?
Or you up and left, right?
Exactly. Or, like in Afghanistan, and you just left. You didn't even say anything. You just left. And now I got this night letter, tacked to my door that they know who I am. So why should I trust you now that you're back? Again, it's like an ex. Don't ask, so it's just, we have to establish that. I think first and foremost, we have to reestablish, because I'm sure that we have old assets in places that we have an interest of, and not necessarily an interest, but it's on our whiteboard that we may end up going back into.
Yeah.
What has our relationship? How did we leave the relationship? And number two, what is our reestablishing contact plan look like? And trust has got to be the biggest thing, because First of all, in some of those places, like probably China and Iran, the case officers who established that contact are probably no longer working that operation, or they've retired or whatever. So now you got a fresh new face who it's a whole weird psychological dance that hopefully we're getting better at.
So like, like pertaining to like the Houthis, right? It's definitely going to be different, like than like setting up shop in like China or even Iran, right?
We don't have, we don't have boots on the ground in Yemen right now. So what I'm saying is that the difficulties, if you don't have people there, your people, not recruited people, then running these sources becomes, it really impossible practically.
Yeah.
Look, I'm sure Jason has experience of trying to do this stuff virtually.
It sucks.
And it's possible, but it's not the initial, not the,
And even trying to run them from across an adjacent country, from across, they might come out every now and then, or you might be able to get in every now and then, which, probably not. How do you know what's going on in the interim? Look at Khost. We're all familiar with the triple agent in Khost, who we kind of fell in love with that agent.
Tell the story.
All right.
I know it. Dee probably does, but I'm sure there's people.
So just the broad, because I don't know all the details of it. Broad story is
no honeypot involved.
No honeypot involved.
Okay, I'm still paying attention.
Hey guys, it's Jack. I just wanted to talk to you today about a way that you can help support the podcast if you're not already. We would really appreciate it if you guys went and reviewed us on Apple or Spotify. Those reviews really help people find the podcast and help it get recognized. And, if you've been enjoying the show, we really appreciate your support. Another thing that you can do to support the channel is to become a Patreon member. So we have Patreon memberships that start at just $5 a month. And when you sign up, you get access to all of our episodes ad-free. That's the big bonus for that. We also do some Patreon bonus episodes for our subscribers. But this is the biggest and best way that you can support the Team House channel and podcast if you'd like to. And we really appreciate that. So go and check us out at patreon.com/theteamhouse.
So a foreign intel service captured a gentleman, or had him in, arrested a gentleman, had him in prison. He was a doctor. We were told, hey, we've got this guy, and he's, spouting off that he knows some pretty high ranking Al-Qaeda members, like personally. And so immediately we jumped on board. We sent a case officer over to speak to this guy, and he, for lack of a better term, said, I have the keys to the kingdom. I'm treating the number 2 in Al-Qaeda at the time, and I can get you close to him. Okay, great. Well, the problem is, this is coming from him. The problem is I can't come into Afghanistan all the time. I do a lot of work in Pakistan, and it'll be, I can come in once a month or whatever it was, once every couple of weeks or so. And that's normal, quote unquote. That happens, but there should have been a little bit more vetting about how this guy basically ran the operation. He told us when he could come in. He told us how he could meet, where he could meet, these sort of things. And we fell in love with that because he was bringing information out. He was giving us things that, that were useful. The problem became where it was, we fell in love with the information and the guy, and then started to back off on things such as his security and our security. So it got to the point, and if anyone's seen the movie Zero Dark 30, it's a pretty good. And again, hopefully there's someone in the, the listenership who can, who may have a little bit more intimate information on it. Long story short, he was given carte blanche to come onto Khost, the Khost, however you want to pronounce it, onto the base. And I believe there were 3 layers of security he needed to go through. So the chief of base had given permission that he was able to bypass, just let him through. He wasn't searched on any of those at any of those checkpoints, to the detriment, or to the against the protests of the chief of security for the base. And
Really?
so he was able to come onto the base, and I won't go into the details of it, but he was able to bring a suicide vest in with him under his robes and clack himself off right in front of I believe it was seven were killed of CIA officers and contractors were killed because we fell in love with this guy. So
and they gathered to get the golden eggs.
To get
right?
the golden eggs, exactly.
Yeah.
I believe I believe a cake was made. I don't know if that's actually true or not for this guy, because we fell in love with the information and the thought of what this person could be. Again, like a relationship, people get in these relationships and they say, this guy could be, or this girl could be the woman or man of my dreams. I'm going to marry them. And we start projecting into the future what could be and not looking at what's in front of us. At the very least, he should have been searched physically, and he hadn't been up to that point or at close to that point. He hadn't been. So he saw an opportunity, and he actually even made a video of basically just before saying this is what you deserve. And so if we don't have that, so you can it goes back to what I was saying about case officering from a distance, from across the border. If you're not in there, or that person isn't coming out on a regular basis, you can look them in the eye and say, how are things going? Just a simple, how's it going? And then ask little questions like, last time how's your sick brother? And if they have no idea what you're talking about, but they mentioned it the last time, well, that's something, that should give you pause. So I think in certain areas that's hard to do. It's very hard to do.
I was just going to ask about Yemen, because it's like, it's not permissible, right?
Exactly. It's a non-permissive environment. So it's very, very hard to do, but it still has to be done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was part of the problem with the covert communication that got burned, is we weren't looking these people in the eye. So we had no idea who was on the other end of it. And it turned out.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
About like the Khost bombing, were there indicators leading up where like people were like, oh, this guy might be full of shit? I mean, he probably established bona fides and stuff like that, but we're leading up to like the big meeting on the base, where was it ever like, oh, this kind of sounds like bullshit, and like it sounds like there was a lot of wishful thinking going on,
There definitely were some who pushed back on how it was being run, because these things don't happen in a vacuum. These operations don't happen in a vacuum. So it's not just the case officer and the asset. There's back at headquarters, one of my jobs when I switched over was to a staff operations officer. So part of my job was, if I was back at headquarters or even in station, was to read the operational cables as they came in and the intel cables to see, do I see anything that doesn't make sense? And also the chief of security is looking at, or the security chief is looking at them. The ops chief is looking at them. The deputy and chief of station are looking at these things. Plus it's going back to headquarters where analysts are looking at them, case management officers. There's all these eyes on them saying,
you need to assume too, like that level of asset, right?
Yeah.
Is going up to like the top too, like NSC.
This especially during that time period.
Like it's being scrutinized heavily. It's not just some asset in a country we're not heavily involved in, where it's got like there's a lot going on. Like there's a lot riding on this.
Absolutely. And I think what happens is sometimes you get people who do have reservations about it, but because someone above them is saying, no, it looks good to me. And there are other things at play that I've heard. I'm not saying they're fact, but the fact that it was the chief of base was a woman, and she was an analyst, I believe, and was one of the first ops personnel to run a base, or station. And I could be wrong on that. Again, I think politics sort of may have come into play here. And so it was kind of like, so far so good. Let's just and it also becomes, they're the eyes on the ground. The chief of base and those people, they're there. They're dealing with this person. They know best, which is not always the case.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get so close to it. Again, it's because this is all like a relationship on the in the civilian world. Sometimes we get so close to a person, we can't see their flaws, or we don't listen to that best friend or, parent that says, you might want to think twice about this.
Yeah.
And that happened in this case, and you see the results of it.
And there's the just the element of, even if the military wasn't such a hierarchical organization, I mean, even in the civilian world, you get groupthink. But then when you get groupthink reinforced by that hierarchy, it becomes tremendously difficult if you are junior and less experienced.
Absolutely.
To think that your judgment is better than all these people who have vastly more experience. So it's not necessarily a lack of courage. It's kind of a humility,
Yeah.
well, I must be wrong. This looks really bad, but no, he's going with it.
Absolutely.
What really intrigues me about that story too, Jason, and I think, an unusual element which may have contributed to the surprise was the fact that, typically a suicide bomber is not, he's not someone with master or skills aside from being able to be a suicide bomber. Otherwise he would be used otherwise. And yet here was a guy who obviously had tremendous skills, right?
Yeah.
And getting in with the Americans, earning their trust, setting this up. And yet he was expendable. I mean?
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to the fact that we didn't have eyes on this guy on a regular and continuing basis. So he had all that time to plan and get the training that he needed, so that knowing that he was coming onto the base and previously he hadn't been searched, things like that. He was able to say, hey, listen, I can get in, no problem, suit me up. And they were able to do it. And if you think about it, at the end of the day, he was a triple agent, or a double agent. So to Al-Qaeda, he was expendable,
Oh, right. Okay. So they probably recruited him after, they gave him a choice that he couldn't, couldn't refuse.
Yeah.
That wasn't a choice after he was already being used by the gringos.
And he was going on to what was more than likely a known CIA base. So it's like, we don't care if you get a couple of garbage men on the base.
The juice was worth the squeeze there.
From a propaganda standpoint, you were able to clack off on a CIA base. So and
honestly, it's way more than just a propaganda win, right? Clacking off on the base. He took out a lot of the people, like the CIA folks. I'm sure that set Khost back fucking a year. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's fucked up out there.
Well, it's just, I mean, I remember, I wasn't involved at all, but it's just, we had a CIA case officer in our class at the War College, and quite a small class. And she was she was in tears that day because she'd known.
Yeah. I remember where I was when I found out. Yeah.
It's kind of wild. Like
it had Jason didn't, it had a really fundamental kind of shocking effect on the agency.
Yeah.
I don't want to use the term trans, but certain things occur in an organization that kind of a watershed in
how I was less than a year
conducted.
I was less than a year at the agency. I'd been there less than a year, and just a couple months short of a year. And I remember finding out, but I also remember thinking about it years later when I finally got a full brief on it. They briefed the station I was at on it, like a lessons learned thing. So it took that long. Now I'm sure other people got a full brief, like immediately what they knew, but it took that long to say, okay, this is everything we know, and this is why we think it happened, and this is the lessons you take up from it. Because yes, we have the stars on the wall, God rest their souls, but we hadn't had something like this in a long time. So we, like you said, Andy, it put us back on our heels.
Yeah, sometimes really painful things happen that end up changing culture for the better because it needed to change, and
absolutely,
sadly, because of this tendency in certainly military organizations to go with kind of the flow on thinking, we don't red team things enough. And when things go horribly wrong, Khost is one example, but we were talking about things, just generally, you want to have a red team whenever you go over anything. And for leaders, you know, it gets really annoying when people, there's always someone who's always naysaying everything you say. But after a while of just being pissed off, I realized, you know, just irritated, not saying anything. I realized actually that's really healthy. You know, A, that he feels he can do that.
Absolutely.
And B, you want someone who's annoying that way.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it does. The cost to take a breath and listen to what that naysayer is putting forward and saying, let's run that and see what the outcome might be. It at least gives you another tool in the toolbox of what could happen and how do we prepare for it. Obviously, you can't prepare for everything, but you can at least get in the ballpark. It's like it's heading that way. You can think back and say, you know, holy crap, Andy, you know, bought this up a year or 6 months ago. Let's see if it's actually going in that direction. If it doesn't turn out to be that way, great. If you head something off, well, then even better, you know. But like you said, if somebody pushes enough, like for those who have seen, you know, Zero Dark 30, the analyst who kept, you know, being a thorn in the side of everyone at headquarters and in the field, it turns out she wasn't wrong. Now, there's obviously a lot more to that story. It wasn't just her that did everything, but it took her to push and push and push and literally say, I don't give a shit that you don't like me, but you're going to listen to what I'm saying either now or after I say I told you so. And they did. And, you know, you look at the results of it.
Yeah.
Parallels to obviously, well, maybe not obviously to what happened 7 October to the Israelis. And I heard that time and time again. We used to be good at red teaming things, and we don't do it anymore. And this is, you know, kind of what happens if people get locked into a certain viewpoint. And
Absolutely.
The voices of dissent were too junior and too divided, isolated to make any difference.
Absolutely. Take the headache now, you know, in training and, you know, man hours and money, whatever, before you have to, you know, rather than the headache of filling coffins and calling families, you know, just do it now. It's a pain in the ass. We all know nobody likes to have to, you know, spend money and time away from family and all this other stuff.
No one likes changing a plan.
Exactly.
Especially if it's their plan. And
Exactly.
especially if they've already put effort into it,
you
know, let alone resources. It's
absolutely. But what's the cost of not doing it?
Yeah.
You know?
So. Yeah. Speaking of sunken cost, I think we need to end because Jason has a job to go to.
Daddy got bills to pay.
I just want to emphasize that we only have winners here. You know, people, professionals, go-getters, with not a lot of time on their hands. So
thanks, gents.
Goodbye from me.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you taking the time to listen, and to you, gents.
Yeah, guys, thank you. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, rate or review 5 stars on Apple or Spotify. Check out the Patreon. Check out Andy's Substack, Andy's Twitter. We're trying to get Jason to get on social media. Maybe it'll happen.
I'm not doing it.
Yeah. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
All right, gents. Take care.